Good evening and welcome. It is time once again for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana, 104.5 FM, and or UPTV, and or YouTube. I'm in lots of places. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I'm here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. Views expressed are those of the speakers and are not intended to represent WRFU, UCIMC, or UPTV, as we like to say on the televised version of this show. These views are our own, and by our in this instance, I mean myself and anyone whose stories or writing that I happen to be reading throughout the course of the show, whose views may leak out around the edges of what they're saying. So, with the legal stuff out of the way, let me dive right into a story entitled Undocumented Immigrants Are Half as Likely to be Arrested for Violent Crimes as U.S.-born citizens. You heard me right. They are half as likely to be arrested. When Donald Trump announced that he was running for president, one of the first issues he raised in his speech was immigration, specifically the idea that undocumented immigrants are dangerous. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people, he said. As Trump's presidency nears its end, his unwavering views on immigration are directly contradicted by a growing body of criminology research. Studies overwhelmingly find no evidence that U.S. immigrants, including those who are undocumented, commit more crimes than native-born Americans. And now a study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences USA that draws from a detailed and well-sourced data set comes to an even more dramatic conclusion. It reports that between 2012 and 2018, compared with their U.S.-born neighbors, undocumented immigrants in Texas were less than half as likely to be arrested for violent crimes or drug offenses, and less than a quarter as likely to be arrested for property crimes. Simply put, we found that undocumented immigrants have lower felony arrest rates than both legal immigrants and especially native-born U.S. citizens, says study co-author Michael Light, a sociologist at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Karis E. Kubrin, a professor of criminology, law, and society at the University of California, Irvine, who was not involved in the research, describes the paper as completely groundbreaking. It's another nail in the coffin of what we know about the link between immigration and crime, he says. Until now, scientists examining the relationship between immigration and crime had to address the issue broadly, in part because many U.S. crime databases do not collect information on immigration status. Research has demonstrated that areas with more immigrants experience no more crime than places with fewer of them, and that immigration surges do not lead to increases in illegal activity. The same has been shown to be true for undocumented immigrants in particular. But as yet, studies have not been able to link a specific immigration status to the rates for specific types of crimes. The new paper is among the first to do so. Light and his team were able to delve into the details after learning that the Texas Department of Public Safety had begun cooperating with the Department of Homeland Security to check and record the immigration status of everyone arrested in the state. He asked if the team could have access to the data, and the Texas officials did not object. It was a eureka moment, Light says, because with these new data, he knew he and his colleagues could do some really interesting work. In addition to calculating the crime rates of undocumented and legal immigrants, as well as native-born Americans, Light and his team analyzed undocumented immigrants' relative contribution to felonies in Texas over the studied period. They found that the proportion of arrests involving undocumented immigrants did not increase with time for certain offenses and even decreased for property, drug, and traffic crimes. Estimating the total population of undocumented immigrants in a particular area can be difficult, and Light concedes that the estimates his team used may not be perfect. To account for potential errors, the researchers calculated how inaccurate their population estimates would have to be to change their findings. They found that the undocumented population in Texas would have to be less than half as large as they had estimated for violent crime rates among such immigrants to match those of U.S.-born Americans. The calculation suggests that their findings are not due to nuances of data or estimation, says Bianca Bersani, a criminologist at the University of Maryland who was not involved in the research. The new study aligns with other research suggesting that immigration reducing policies do not prevent crime. After the federal government introduced the Secure Communities program, which requires local law enforcement to work with federal immigration officials as a means to expel individuals who, quote, present the most significant threats to public safety, end quote, deportations increased, but crime did not drop. Likewise, Kubrin and her colleagues found that when California became a sanctuary state in 2017, limiting state and local police cooperation with federal immigration authorities, crime rates did not rise. The reality is that immigration policy is not a solution to curb crime, she says. Yet, Trump has poured resources into the immigration issue. The number of arrests made by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, increased by 30% in fiscal year 2017, after Trump signed an executive order giving the agency more authority to detain undocumented immigrants. And in fiscal year 2019, the number of people apprehended at the border between U.S. and Mexico increased to its highest level in 12 years, according to the Pew Research Center. Researchers are not yet certain why undocumented immigrants are less crime-prone than documented ones or native-born Americans. One contributing factor may be that individuals who immigrate from other countries to the U.S. are highly self-motivated and intrinsically less likely to commit crime. It is also possible that immigrants fear deportation if they are caught, so they are more careful to follow laws. American culture may also play a role. The longer immigrants reside in the United States, the more they adapt to American society and the more likely their arrest rates resemble those of the native-born, says Ramiro Martinez, Jr., a quantitative criminologist at Northeastern University. Although questions on aspects of the issue remain, what is clear is that the new findings add to a robust body of literature suggesting that undocumented immigrants are not, in fact, criminals. It's rare in the social scientists to get such consistent findings, Kubrin says. It's really breathtaking. So yeah, I've been saying this, pretty much the same thing on the show for years now. And of course, I didn't have this kind of documentation to fall back on, but it's pretty conclusive. And one point that they made here that I thought was interesting, that I wanted to highlight, the quote again is, one contributing factor may be that individuals who emigrate from other countries to the U.S. are highly self-motivated and intrinsically less likely to commit crime. And that's been something that I've talked about a lot on this show, is just the fact that the people that are coming here, the people who are really going out of their way, even to the extent of breaking laws to do it, to get here, are really motivated to be here. They really want to be here. They really want to live in this place, and that makes them the most probably public-spirited citizens of any that you're liable to run into, in terms of just how much they want to be involved and be a part of this new place that they live in. They are not lazy people by any means. You don't drop everything in your life and move partway around the world to some new place that you've never been before if you are lazy. That's not a lazy thing to do. I mean, when was the last time you moved just anywhere to a new apartment or a new house or something? It's a lot of work. It's a huge amount of work. There's all sorts of things to conclude and to put away and to resolve, and all sorts of new things to start. I mean, it's a big deal. So if you're going to go to that much trouble, you really want to make it work, as I have said before. And so these are people that you want to have here. They're not people that you want to keep away. They're people that you really want to come in and participate in society because they really want to be here and they really want it to be a great experience. That's what they're hoping for, and that's what they're going to be trying to make it into. So I think that's a part. I mean, it's easy to say, oh, well, maybe the people that come here are just less likely to commit crimes. Who knows? I think it's a combination of things, and I doubt if that is the single factor that contributes to this big difference, really. Half as likely to commit serious crimes as native-born people. That's a pretty big difference. So I wouldn't try to pretend that that is the reason by itself, but I'll bet you that has something to do with it. Certainly. And maybe the longer you're here, the more you're just like, well, yeah, this is just home, and this is how things are, and this is the way the world works, and you become more lax about these things. But at least when you first get here, and for a good long time afterwards, you are really trying to make this into a good experience for yourself, because why not? I mean, you took a big chance, you moved a long way, you gave up everything, and you risked a lot to do it. Of course, you're going to want it to be a great experience. So anyway, that's something, and I thought that was interesting. Now we have some statistics to back up our claims, or more statistics. We've had a lot of these for a long time, but that's pretty definitive. Anyway, moving onward. Our next article, which will be full of me mispronouncing names, probably, is entitled, "If COVID-19 Vaccines Bring an End to the Pandemic, America Has Immigrants to Thank." So, again, apologizing in advance for not knowing how to pronounce Hungarian names. So Hungarian-born scientist Katalin Karikó believed in the potential of messenger RNA, the genetic molecule at the heart of 2 new COVID-19 vaccines, even when almost no one else did. Karikó began working with RNA as a student in Hungary. When funding for her job there ran out, Karikó immigrated to Philadelphia in 1985. Over the years, she's been rejected for grant after grant, threatened with deportation, and demoted from her faculty job by a university that saw her research as a dead end. Through it all, Karikó just kept working. If new COVID-19 vaccines help life in the U.S. get back to normal next year, the nation will have many immigrants such as Karikó to thank. Scientists and investors born outside the U.S. played crucial roles in the development of vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna. It's a remarkable vindication for the argument often made by the biotech industry that innovation depends on the free movement of people and ideas. Now Karikó is a senior vice president at BioNTech, the company that partnered with Pfizer to make the first COVID-19 vaccine to get emergency authorization in the United States. BioNTech is a company based in Germany and led by immigrants from Turkey. Immigrants are playing key roles in nearly every aspect of the vaccine effort in the United States. Even the chief advisor to Operation Warp Speed, the Trump administration's vaccine distribution program, is an immigrant, Moncef Slaoui, the former head of GlaxoSmithKline's vaccines department. President Trump often takes credit for the record-breaking speed of vaccine development and for unleashing America's scientific genius, as he puts it. But people in the biotech industry say that American genius depends on a pool of global talent. We are an intellectual magnet for the best of the best from around the world, said Jeremy Levin, CEO of Ovid Therapeutics and chairman of the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, the U.S. Industry Trade Group. Levin, who was born in South Africa, said high-skilled immigrants are attracted to the U.S. for its great educational institutions and for its biotech industry that's willing to take big risks. We in America are willing to take a chance, Levin said. It is the willingness to fail in the endeavor to find a medicine that could make the difference to millions of people around the world. And that characteristic is what's drawn so many from abroad who are just going to have a go at it. Levin said nearly 1/3 of the biotech workforce here was born outside of the United States. If you also count the children of immigrants, he said, it's roughly half. But Levin worries it's gotten harder in recent years for those people to get here. The Trump administration has placed more restrictions on immigrants who want to study and work in the country. Immigration hardliners accuse pharmaceutical companies and other tech-driven industries of using foreign workers to hold down wages. The president says he wants to protect American jobs and often talks about immigrants as a threat and a burden. That's how he talks about the coronavirus as well, referring to it as the China virus. It's a very racist comment, says Dr. Victor Zhao, president of the National Academy of Medicine, a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. He's an expert on global health who was born in China. We all recognize this appears to be a blame game, right? To divert your responsibility by saying that somebody else gave it to us, Zhao said. A virus does not see any borders. The virus has spread around the world, killing at least 1.6 million people, including more than 300,000 in the United States. Now the U.S. has developed 2 vaccines, and doses are being shipped around the country. Both use the mRNA technology pioneered in part by Kariko at the University of Pennsylvania. At the time, Kariko said she applied for dozens of grants to support her work. I never get the grant. All of them were rejected, she said. Nobody was really interested in messenger RNA therapy. As the rejection letters piled up, Kariko was demoted from her faculty position, but she persisted. When you do science, the whole wide world just does not exist. So as long as you have an idea and some experiments to do, it is fun, she said. Kariko and her colleagues at Penn eventually solved some of the key problems holding the technology back. This week, Moderna's vaccine became the second to win a Food and Drug Administration Advisory Panel's recommendation for emergency authorization. The company, which was started 10 years ago in Boston, is also led by immigrants. This country has done amazing things, and I think that a big part of that is people who bring in their own capabilities, their own dreams, aspirations, said Nobar Afayan, Moderna's chairman. He was an early investor in the company and also runs his own venture capital firm, Flagship Pioneering. Afayan was born in Lebanon, lived in Montreal, and trained at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He said he thinks there's a link between the immigrant experience and innovation. I think of innovation as a form of intellectual immigration, Afayan said. You leave your comforts behind you. You face unrecognizable challenges. You take nothing for granted. You don't feel like in your new country people owe you anything. It took scientists at Moderna and BioNTech less than a year to bring these new vaccines to market. It was an unprecedented race against time made possible by decades of work from some of the best minds in the world. And here again, I'm gonna repeat something that this person said because I think this is very interesting. He said there's a link. This is Afayan, Nobar Afayan, Moderna's chairman. He said he thinks there's a link between the immigrant experience and innovation. Quote, I think of innovation as a form of intellectual immigration, Afayan said. You leave your comforts behind you. You face unrecognizable challenges. You take nothing for granted. You don't feel like in your new country people owe you anything, end quote. And that, if anything, describes the act of immigration, of picking up and going to some new place and starting over from scratch. That does it right there. It's a great quote, I think, and it's really interesting to apply it to the notion of innovation. God, immigration, that word too much. Because, really that's what innovation is. It's like, I'm going to just try something new. You get out of your comfort zone. Everybody does it this way. This is how it's been done. This is how you were trained to do it. is go that way. But you say, I think over here, I think there's something over here. I'm going to try going that way. Nobody else has gone that way, or they maybe tried and failed, or they wandered off the path or something, but you're sure that if you just keep going, or if you keep going in the right way, you're going to get somewhere. That's what innovation is. That's what creativity is, really, is just, I'm going to try something new. I'm going to try something different. And that's what immigration is, trying something new, trying something different. And I think that's great. And I'm glad. I didn't notice that. I'll have to admit, I wish I could take credit for having put those in that order to make that point more clear to you. But honestly, I didn't. I just found the articles and stuck them in there. But seeing that now and having spoken about it for a little bit earlier, I can see the connection there. And I think it's really interesting. Now, here's something that's also interesting and kind of disturbing as well. But it's one of those things that we're going to have to face here, because I don't think the problem is going to go away anytime soon. This is entitled, How Fake News is Hatching in Immigrant Communities. Ugh. So in August, I was on the phone with my mother, a 70-year-old Korean immigrant, to discuss the upcoming election. In the past, she had complained that President Trump was a lunatic, so I naturally assumed that she would support or at least be neutral about Joe Biden. I don't like him either, she told me. He'll be soft on China. I know all about his son Hunter's business dealings there. Hearing her parrot a right-wing talking point was out of the ordinary. My mother doesn't watch Fox News or any other English-language news. In her 40-plus years living in the United States, she has never voted. Alarmed, I began calling her more often to whack down spurious claims, as if I were playing a carnival game. Sick of my calls, my mother eventually registered to vote for the first time and voted for Mr. Biden. But since the election, the fake news she hears has only worsened, spiking from Fox News talking points to batty QAnon-level conspiracy theories. When I ask her where she gets her news, my mother simply says, everyone thinks this. Who is everyone? Everyone, she insists, rattling off all her friends who have told her falsehoods that George Soros or Bill Gates will control Mr. Biden. As if under the spell of a cult, my mother has a fresh new conspiracy theory for me each time we speak. Recently, she asked me if Mr. Biden stole the election, because how else could thousands of votes suddenly have appeared for him in Michigan? While it's well established that fake news is spiraling out of control, we must pay attention to the disinformation rapidly hatching in non-white immigrant communities as well. Asian Americans are the fastest growing electorate in the nation and are becoming a powerful voter bloc as more and more live in swing states. Polls have shown, Polls have so far shown that Asian Americans voted for Mr. Biden by a smaller margin than they did for Hillary Clinton in 2016, a rightward trend that Christian Chen, executive director of the nonpartisan civic organization APIA Vote, said could be partly because of an influx of disinformation. With the upcoming U.S. Senate elections in Georgia, Democrats cannot afford much slippage. Right-wing conspiracy theories have infiltrated Asian and Latino communities through social media platforms like WeChat, WhatsApp, Facebook, KakaoTalk, and YouTube. Organizers say that older immigrants who don't consume mainstream English language media can be more susceptible to disinformation about American politics. Disinformation is really hard to track because it isn't just contained in the continental U.S., but being lobbied from friends and family from, let's say, Colombia. Maria Teresa Kumar, chief executive of Voto Latino, said, Democrats don't understand how deep it is. Non-white voters are the Democratic Party's base, but the party has ignored them, assuming that the Republican Party's racist and nativist politics would be enough to mobilize them. An APIA vote survey conducted this past summer found that half of Asian Americans had not been contacted by either party. This is typical. Asian Americans have historically been left out of voter outreach efforts because they make up just under 6% of the nation and cluster in blue coastal states. Trying to engage an atomized demographic that speaks dozens of different languages can also pose a challenge to political organizers. Asian Americans and Latinos both comprise dozens of different nationalities, making it difficult to draw broad conclusions about their voting patterns. But anti-communism has traditionally been part of the Republican Party's appeal to older immigrants, and disinformation that paints the Democratic Party's platform as socialist has reinforced that appeal, especially among some older Korean, Chinese, Taiwanese, and Vietnamese immigrants who fear anything left to center teeters too close to the Chinese Communist Party. Right-wing groups have also used WhatsApp and WeChat to smear the goals of Black Lives Matter, warning that mass riots were to occur on Election Day to deter Asian and Latino immigrants from going out to vote. It's nearly impossible to chase down all the disinformation scattered across the globe. It's spread by former Trump aides, foreign governments, and a Falun Gong-backed media empire determined to take down the Chinese government. Steve Bannon partnered with the exiled Chinese billionaire Guo Wengui to paint bogus stories of hidden business dealings by the Biden family in China, which then went viral among the Chinese diaspora. Yingding Tang, president of the civil society organization Boat People SOS, has noticed many Vietnamese-language Facebook groups, some with tens of thousands of followers, spreading falsehoods about the U.S. elections to Vietnamese nationals and immigrants. The disinformation that reaches my mother from ethnic language platforms is often traced to Mr. Trump himself. My mother doesn't get her news from conservative Korean YouTube channels or the messenger platform Kakao Talk. She hears it over the phone from friends, some of whom recently told her that hospitals had been inflating COVID-19 death numbers to qualify for more insurance money. She had no idea the president falsely claimed that during a rally in October. If the global ubiquity of fake news is not addressed, it could continue to peel away minority community support that Democrats count on. Disinformation has been weaponized to poach on immigrant fears so that, like their white working-class counterparts, some Asian and Latino immigrants are voting against their economic interests. With tech giants refusing to provide serious oversight, fake news not only exploits their fears of socialism, but provokes any latent anti-black prejudices, warning that to defund the police would lead to anarchy. Democrats and progressives must be surgical in their canvassing and training many more bilingual volunteers to reach out to immigrant voters via social media and in person, finding trusted messengers who take the time to build relationships with community leaders. Grassroots organizations like the Georgia-based Asian American Advocacy Fund, Viet Fact Check, and Asian Americans Against Trump have been committed to that labor. Lastly, for progressives who come from immigrant families, it's up to us. We must use our blood connections to counter these lie machines by engaging with our families and friends about, for instance, the crucial importance of the Georgia Senate elections or the detailed policies behind the defund the police movement that can help stop cops from killing black people. In November, Asian Americans came out in record numbers and helped deliver swing states like Georgia to Mr. Biden.